Hello and welcome to Gravitas WINS Conversations. KK and I are doing a series on being a dad. We already talked about how we learn to be a dad, who are our role models, and how we can bond with our kids. In today's episode, we are going to talk about family culture and how we can build such a family culture. Hope you find it interesting. Hello, KK. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Joseph. Good to be back after a break. How are
Yes,
you doing?
yes. Very good, KK. KK, how do you define family culture? What does it mean to you?
Hmm.
And why do you think family culture is important?
So, I'm a career-wise, I'm a transformed marketer now from a sales guy. So, um, I think within marketing, very specialized in branding. So, a lot of worked with companies and leaders on building organizational culture. So, when we thought about this family culture, it was little new actually. In the sense it was not so familiar, in the sense we don't often speak about in our families, or we don't really do that. But I am going to draw parallels between how it's defined in organizations and probably extrapolate that to the families, because as such, I mean, to be frank, we are not exposed to the family culture, at least in a written form or very spoken stuff like structured one. Although it exists, there is no denying that it exists. It's just that I feel that it's a shared beliefs, shared values, shared activities, right? Like what is important from our fathers, our forefathers, our family ecosystem ethos. I think all of that will define beliefs, right? Like all of that defines I mean, a family culture in my view. It could also be like, okay, if somebody asks, for example, an address, or somebody asks for an help, how do we react to that, right?
Mm,
Like all those instances, I think will also expose how what is our family culture, right? Like some people, I mean, if you, I mean, in those days, like if, for example, when we were growing up, if somebody were asking us for an address, we generally, as a kid also, we generally sometimes leave the thing that we were doing, and we will take them to their family, to their home itself, or if we know that it's a known person, right? Like we will I mean, take them along and take it to the address itself. That's one way of doing it. The other way is you just, I mean, brush off, and you just say that, okay, I don't know, or you can just say that, okay, it's not my business, and things like that. You can even pass it on. It could be the same with anything else, right? Like now we are grown up, and I feel families which had grandparents and forefathers living, at least one generation above living, not just the next generation. Like for example, if I were the person referring to, not just my father, but my if my grandparents were there, I think there is a larger chance and bigger impact that will create in passing on the values, because this is rooted in across generations, right? Like certain
mm,
things are rooted across generations, and some we pick up as environment changes, as I mean, the situation is different. The world we lived in our childhood versus the world that our children are living are almost different for in various aspects. So I think adapting to that new age also matters. But I think that's what I would think about it. In your view, what do you think, Joseph? Like,
yeah, I'm going to draw a lot of parallel from corporate world and see how it is applicable.
hmm,
As Peter Drucker said, the the culture eats strategy for breakfast. Right? In office, we can plan whatever strategy that you want, but eventually it will be the culture that will determine the outcome of that particular strategy. Whether our team does it, not does it, ignores it. So from that angle, and it's the same thing with our families also, is that culture is how our kids behave when we are not around. That's culture. How they decide when we are not around. That's culture. Correct. I'm going to give you an anecdote. One of my friend shared with me. His son got an admission in US university. So they were driving, mom, dad, and the son. They were driving to the airport, and as usual, the mother was like, "Don't do this. Don't do this. You have to wake up early. You don't drink cold water that will be there," and so on and so forth. All of that, the whole trip, she was going on giving these kinds of instructions. And halfway through, both the father and the son got exhausted with all of hearing this. So he turned around and said, for 17 years, if you didn't bring him in that particular way, this 17 minutes of instruction is not going to change it. Right? So, so this is what Gandhi's mother also said to Gandhiji.
Right. Exactly.
Right? So it depends on how we have brought them up, and then
Yeah.
one day they are going to go into the world on their own. We are not going to be
Yeah.
around. So what values we have given them, how we have made them decide, what what we have taught them to speak, those are the things that they are going to go and exhibit. Right? So
Yeah.
that's the culture. So culture is what determines how they stand on their own feet when
Yeah.
we are not around. In fact, it is not only after they leave our home. So like, you will experience this. I
Mhm.
experience this a lot. So I'll go to office. I would say, don't watch device, read this book, write this, whatever, any of those kinds of stuff. I'd have gone to office. A lot of times they will do it. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not berating my boys, but time to time, what will happen is they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And when I come back, it is, why you didn't do it? Because I got distracted. I went into YouTube. I saw this. So the point is how they decide, how they behave when you are not around. That's culture,
True.
right? And culture, like as you said, if they would have seen you taking some stranger to that particular address,
Yeah.
they will go and do that.
Yeah.
If they saw us mistreating a stranger, they'll think that is how it needs to be done. That's, I mean, we all mimic.
Yep. Yeah.
So they will mimic that. So that's why, that's how I see culture.
Yeah.
And I see that is why it is important to build the culture as well. Okay.
Great
Now that
point. Yeah.
we know that culture is important, what are the elements in a culture? Again, we can draw from everywhere, including our corporate life. But what are the elements of culture? And then we will go into how we can build those elements. But in your
Yeah.
opinion, what are those values? What are those
So,
elements of culture?
one of the thing that key to that building a culture is communication, because
Yes.
I think whatever you have in your mind or whatever is imbibed in you, if it has to transcend to your wife or your spouse or your kids and the extended family or whomever it matters, I think communication becomes the key. Yeah, the other thing I would say is little bit of a soft definition or things like that, right? Like how, what are the things that matters to us, right? Like, so that
Mm.
is not something which you put it in a, I mean, like in an organization, in a document, right? Like values, something like that. But for example, in a family, trust is something which is basic, right? Like without trust between husband and wife, or as I mean, father and son, or kids and the parents, I don't think that is something which we can build this foundation on. I mean, any organization, even for that matter, treats nowadays trust as a basic thing. So I think that's non-negotiable. And I think how do we bring that up? Like it's how we exhibit in our day-to-day
Mm.
interactions with our
Mm.
kids and things like that. So communication, trust, and then for example the shared ethos, right? Like for example, what are the things that you do on certain days or when
Mm.
certain things
Mm.
happen, right? Like for example, we just celebrated our Pongal, I mean like 2 3 days back or a week, early this week. So we all went to my hometown and we celebrated along with my mother, and that's a general sense of belongingness. And in a festival day, we all come together and do certain things, like share it with our extended family or friends, neighbors, and they also come and I mean share those things. So those, I think these are some of the practices also that you do that gets imbibed into probably the overall gamut of the culture, I would say. So
I'm going to add one more thing to that.
yeah.
And you rightly said that, but I'm going to borrow from your favorite tagline. You're a storyteller. So instead of communication, I'm going to make it into stories.
Ah, yeah,
So
true.
the one that you talked about, family values, right? I mean, as a family, what do you
Hmm.
value? It could be spending time with the grandparents and
Hmm.
understanding the passing on of the values from the previous generation, a multi-generational value, respecting elders. That's a family value. If there is a festival, we will not celebrate alone, but we will celebrate as a family, as a belonging, as a community, as a society. Togetherness is a family value. That's what you're showing by that particular practice. So the first thing is, what are the family values? Second thing is the stories
Yeah.
around that particular family values, whatever
Yeah.
that family values you're talking about. So we already talked about how do you bond with kids,
Hmm.
and in that we talked about we have to spend a lot of time with the kids. Lot of times what happens is, okay, I want to spend, what do I spend on, what should I
Yeah.
do? So I think that's where the stories comes in. You
Yes.
know what, when your mom was like this, when your dad was a small kid, we went there. So a lot of stories, obviously we will also enjoy, the kids enjoy the stories.
Yeah.
And around those family values, if we can bring in, I think those are the elements. That's how we will build the family values. The
Yeah.
other aspect is, as you know, I recently interviewed a major general on this particular podcast. One of the things that he also said is there has to be psychological safety.
Hmm. Yeah.
The kids will have to feel safe enough for them to come and express their questions, doubts,
Yeah.
and mess up sometimes.
Hmm.
If they are going to be so afraid of making a
Hmm.
mistake, oh, dad will beat me, he will hit me, he will yell at me, he will ground me, any of those kinds of stuff, they are not going to be open enough about what they
Yeah.
are thinking, what their questions are, or even that why should we drive from Chennai to Madurai to celebrate? Why can't we say? So they won't ask that question,
Yeah.
right?
True.
So I think those three has to go hand in hand. The
Hmm.
family values, we need to know the family values. There has to be a lot of stories. I'm absolutely, knowing you, I'm absolutely sure on the way from Chennai to Madurai and Madurai to Chennai, you narrated a lot of stories to your kids. I know this is not the only trip that you take, but in
Yeah.
most of the trips, you will kind of narrate some of the stories, retell some of the stories again and again, which
Yeah.
you think are important. So, stories make up a huge part of building family culture. And then there's safety,
Yeah.
psychological safety for kids to come up, open themselves up. And when they are young, these, it is almost like a question,
Hmm.
but as they grow, they are going to form their own identity.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So sometimes they can they open up. So say for example, for boys, can they talk openly about their sexual
Hmm.
things, how they are developing and everything? And
Hmm.
similarly for girls too, with their moms, can they talk about it? Or if I say, oh no, you can't talk about it, it's wrong, he's anyway going to find it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that it's not going to be with me.
With me. Yeah. With you. Yeah.
Right, so
It's
he's
true.
going to end up with something or the other. It may not be what I think the way it has to be. So that's why
Yeah.
that psychological safety is absolutely important in family if you have to build that family culture.
Very
That's
true.
what I think.
Very true, Joseph. Yeah, I think psychological safety definitely plays a large role, even between spouses, right? Like because how each other communicate and share
Mm,
things, right? Like I think kids are also seeing that and observing. So of course, I think that will also transcend to them because it's not something psychological safety is not something which we can say that I am offering you a psychological safety. Like they have to feel
true.
it.
Yes, absolutely true,
They
true,
have to
true.
feel it. I think how you behave, I think that will matter a lot. And yeah, I think a lot of these are easier said than done. I would say some
The,
elements, yeah, I think are I mean possible to do this a little more with effort, but some are like at the moment how you react, right? Like psychological safety, for example, it's like at the moment how you react. So I think first of all you have to be as parents, our husband and wife has to be really, mother and father has to be really aligned to that as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right, KK, on that. So I want to mention 2 points in it. One, it is not something that you're offering. It is what you are.
Yeah.
It is again the culture that you create in the family where they can come and open up.
Mm.
So as you know, Jerry, my younger son, I mean, extremely naughty, extremely smart. He will do something, and when I ask him, did you do it? Did you play games when you were supposed to write the blog post or learn? He will say yes. And okay, you are grounded or something else. But you also said I should be open and I should be honest. I told you the truth. so
Yeah.
so now why are you punishing me? So I'm caught in that particular situation. I don't know
Yeah.
what to do in that particular thing. So so you he's right.
Mm.
Next time, if I'm going to punish him for doing
Yeah.
that, next time he's not going to open enough.
True.
But at the same time, if I don't punish him, he's going to continue to do that and think that
Continue.
okay, I can do that. So I need to find a balance there. So kids are going to be extremely smart in figuring out, how to game the system, whatever that
Yeah.
system that you put in. But the point that I'm saying is that the reason why I'm sharing this is it is not easy,
Yeah.
because at that moment you might have come back from office, you are tired, something might have happened in the office which has affected you, so you are in your own emotional turmoil,
Yeah.
and at that time this happens. You beat him up, you scold him, he's only going to remember that next time, he's not going to happen. So there's quite a lot of things that happens. So it is
Yeah.
not something that we can say, okay, I'm open, you come and say whatever you can. It's what you create, what you provide for them at that particular time, which is what's going to determine. So absolutely, that's a very valid point, KK, that it is not something that we can say. It is
Yeah.
something that we need to create a space for, where they can really feel safe.
So,
There,
Joseph,
yeah.
just one point. I think I had this thought, right? Like, see, I didn't grow up with grandparents because
Mm.
my father's parents died even when he was younger, like 16, 17. He lost both his parents. And in my mom's side, although I had a grandfather who lived till he saw my marriage, my grandma, maternal grandmother, she died when my mother was very young, maybe not even before her teenage, she died. But what I believe is, I think one is the luxury that you have if they have grandparents are there, because as parents, we are also adapted to the environment that we grew up in. We imbibe certain things from our parents, and we also adapted to the environment that brought us up. Like for example, I mean, I grew up in Gandhi Museum, so did my schooling. I mean, all my childhood till my college, I was there. So a lot of that impact, that ecosystem had an impact on me. So I gave up on eating non-vegetarian, even though by birth I mean, my parents used to eat and things like that. But that's the influence that I had. So two things which I wanted to ask you is, what is the influence that if the grandparents, right, like luxury that you, if both the grandparents are available, but what will be the difference, or how good or how important that is, and what is the impact of the environment also on this bringing up this family culture?
Oh, much like you, KK, I also didn't live under grandparents. I also didn't have that kind of a privilege, but my kids have. What I see is, it's again how you see family unit.
Hmm.
Do you see family as a unit to breed kids and launch pad for launching their own career, life, success, so on and so
Hmm.
forth? Or do you see family as a multi generational team?
Hmm.
My parents did something, they passed on that value to me, and then I did something with that. Now I'm passing on to next generation. So it's basically that I'm passing the thing, values, passing on to the others. So the way I see it is, it's a multi generational team.
Hmm. I
So
too echo the same. So that's why I'm thinking of
yeah,
grandparents as one of the important aspects of that. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So in my case, what happens is, obviously, their value systems are different. My value system is different. My kids' value systems are going to be different. But there is going to be a thread that goes through right? So whenever we meet, as you know, my parents now live in with my sister. So whenever, and then at least once a year we have been meeting.
Mm.
Last year we have met multiple times. My
Mm.
mom became 75 last year.
Mm.
A year before that my dad became 75, and we are very lucky that they are alive, they are
Yeah.
able, they are with all the mental faculty, and they can interact with the kids, and all of those kinds of stuff. We are extremely privileged about it. So whenever they go there, there's a lot of interaction that happens. And again, as we have been discussing here,
Mm.
there is one thing is to say something,
Yeah.
but it is entirely another to observe somebody else living that.
True.
So my kids are saying that
Mm.
my dad is not very expressive.
Mm.
He will
Mm.
not come in and say, you need to wake up in the morning, you need to read Bible, you need to pray, you need to be active. He will never say it. He's not expressive at all.
Mm.
But when my kids are there, they see their grandpa
Ah.
getting up in the morning. He has showered before everybody else,
Else. Yeah.
even at this age. And then by the time kids come down to eat, he's sitting there, taken bath,
Mm.
and reading Bible. So they see
Mm.
that
Yeah.
he never openly tells this is what you need to do.
True.
Then what happens? They see that every day.
Mm.
Then when we come here and when we are discussing, okay, what did you learn, what did you see, what did you like, whatsoever, something about that. Oh, you know what, granddad did that, tata did that,
Mm.
and tata was before everybody else, and so on and so forth. Like, say for example, if we had to go anywhere,
Mm.
my dad would be, even today my dad would be the first one to get ready.
True.
So they see that. And when we are discussing, when we have to go somewhere, it'll be in a very jovial manner, but that is when it'll come in
Yeah.
that they have observed is that, oh, don't be a tata. What do you mean? No, what do you mean by don't be a tata? Oh, he will get ready 1 hour before we have to leave.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
So
They have observed it.
they are verbalizing.
Absolutely, they are verbalizing what they have witnessed, right?
Witnessed. Yeah.
So
That's ultimate.
absolutely,
You're
my
putting
my dad.
labels to a certain culture and values, right? Like attributing that to the individual, so it is easy to relate to also, right? Like, and
Correct.
yeah, you would
They
really
are
want to emulate
yes, they are personifying that value.
value. Yeah.
Even though my dad is not expressive, he's not teaching in that particular sense, he's teaching by walking. So they
Yeah.
are able to observe and they are able to personify that particular value, and it will stay with them,
Yeah. Yeah. True. True. True.
right? So now I don't have to tell them to get ready early.
True.
I have to only say be like tata.
We like that. That's good.
So yes, it's a privilege,
Yeah.
and it is a huge benefit also
Mm.
to bring that particular culture.
Yeah. So
That's what
I
I would say.
actually I'm not saying it for this thing, like they say this thing appropriateness, but I really got goosebumps when you said your kids are personifying their grandfather. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I think so that's important because I took some values of what my father used to do certain aspects, right? Like because we were in the campus, there used to be a lot of visitors actually for various aspects. A lot of visitors from foreign countries
Mm.
to meet up with some of the Ghanaian leaders who are staying there, or there will be on and off some every year, some or the other, some yatra, sarvodi yatra, something like that will happen. Some 20-30 people will be traveling by foot and something like that, peace march and things like that. I must have witnessed almost every year these peace marches, various on various occasions. So I mean, invariably, at least one meal we used to provide it in our in our home for those visitors and the march people who are part of that congregation. So I think to me, even though we were not so economically very well off, this aspect, right? Like, I mean, providing for food. I mean, this is not something which my father or my mother
Mm,
had
mm.
too much of fuss about, right? Like that they are doing it, or it's beyond certain things. But now, when I am out of that ecosystem, right, that environment of Gandhiism, I don't see this happening anywhere at all. I have never experienced this after I left the campus, and it's not something which anyone other than people who are associated with that group, right? Even if they were living outside the campus, even though they were working for the museum, they may not have witnessed it. So I think the impact of environment. And so now I feel that providing for food, or like if somebody is in needy, I mean, whatever I could do at my level, at my capacity, I don't think that that is a big first, because I have something, and somebody needs it, and why not? So yeah, I think I also feel that the impact of environment that one grows up in, I mean, that also has a huge influence on the kids. I mean, that also part of the cultural fabric, I would say.
As I have shared earlier, I grew up in a quarters where there were all sorts of people, and I think that shaped my thinking because I lived among Hindus, Muslims, we Christians, and then all sorts of social strata, poor, young, I mean, poor, rich, middle class family, all of those kinds of. So in all ways, it was a melting pot.
Yeah,
It was all
very
there,
true.
and if there was, so during summer there would be drought, everybody will come together. Okay, we need to solve this particular problem,
Problem, yeah.
and everybody will put their heads together. There will be a teacher. My dad was a teacher. There will be a engineer. There will be some other peon.
Mm,
Everybody will come together. Okay, we need to do something, and then
yeah,
they will all decide. Okay, you go and do this. You go and do this, and we will go and solve that particular thing.
yeah.
I saw that, and a lot of times I was also part of
Mm.
such initiatives,
So you
right?
also are part of the overall this thing, right? Like, so you see, and you also get inspirational from all
Yeah, yeah.
this.
See, the thing
Actually,
is, again, I learned without somebody teaching me
mm,
explicitly
yeah.
that we are all humans. We all have to work together. No, I mean, nobody taught me. It was
Mm,
not even in our kind of thought
yeah.
process, in our speech, that, oh, he's a Hindu, he's a Christian, he's a Muslim. We all came together.
Yeah.
If there was a wedding, we all came together. And the only, probably the only way this religious thing would even come in
Mm.
would be that if it's a biryani, it's a Muslim biryani would be a lot better than what we
Yeah.
make. If it's a
Yeah.
cake, you have to go to a
Yeah.
Christian family to make it, to
Mm.
get it. If it is that Ganesh Chaturthi, like, I mean, that laddu, or so you have to go there. So that's the only way we saw religion at all. But
Yeah.
otherwise, in everything, the social functions or weddings or
Yeah. So
school, all of
those
those
days,
things.
I think at least in our generation, I mean, when we were growing up, that, I mean, that bucketing was not there. Like labeling
Yeah.
and other things
So
were
the
very
point that I
less.
wanted to
Yeah.
point I wanted to say was, I think I might have got distracted. The point that I wanted to say was, nobody taught that specifically,
True.
but it was in that particular culture it was happening.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
So that's the point. Like, I mean, but even for solving that water crisis, nobody said, I mean, it is not my job, or you
Yeah.
should not do this, you need to be proactive, agency. Nobody said any of those things. We all came together and did it, right? So that's
Yeah.
very important to do that. Finally, KK,
Mm.
like, I mean, again, we can talk a lot on the family culture. Maybe we need to have a second session on this as well.
Mm.
Having said all of these things, one thing that I'm struggling,
Yeah.
or rather one thing that is in my mind, my son is became, I mean, he's already a teenager. The elder one, the younger
Mm.
one, will hit teenage in a couple of months. They are forming their own personality.
Yeah.
I still think about what is that family culture, and then their personality. Should it be in conflict? Should it gel together? Should it gel together? I have no idea.
Mm.
I'm,
Mm.
I'm still kind of processing that. I want to give him space for his own personality, to develop his own personality, but at the same time, it has to be within that family
Mm.
culture. So that
Yeah.
is one thing that I'm struggling. I don't want to, kind of paint, oh,
Mm.
we have figured out everything, and we know all
Yeah.
the answers, kind of a stuff. But on that, do you have any thoughts? I know it is
Well,
too early for you.
I'm going to just give a blank look for this because I'm still learning the first,
Yeah, yeah,
trying to crawl now in the family culture stairs of probably
yeah,
100
yeah.
stairs that I need to climb. But yeah, I think a few things will definitely happen, Joseph, right? Like what you said earlier in the show. if you're not taught them like in the 17 years, these 17
Yeah.
minutes is not going to matter. So I think I'm sure they have picked up quite a few things from you, from Akka, from their grandparents, from their attais and uncle, all of them. I'm sure they might have imbibed quite a few elements of that. So the essential elements, I'm sure the core would be already there. And
Mm,
it's also about what the environment poses to them, right? Like, because some of the aspects that we may not have encountered in our childhood, they are encountering it, like the social media
mm,
influence,
mm, mm.
the peer pressure, the
True, true.
height of the peer pressure, right? Like what we saw versus what they are facing. Sometimes I feel pity for this generation, because
Yes,
I'm sure we grew up in a much more comfortable and safe space than them.
very true.
And then it's also about the politics, the
Mm,
other aspects, right? Like what sort of policies governments are enacting and things like that, right? So I'm sure that also, right, like will add additional flavor where you don't even have a control on as parents, right? Like, because we are also just sometimes reacting, and we are
yeah,
not even ready for that. So I think everyone will take their own personality with, if we are really have done a
our
reasonably good
job.
job, the
Yeah.
core will remain, because I feel that is something which you and I could be. I mean, for that matter, anyone can see whatever we had imbibed from our parents, our
Yeah.
grandparents, and other things. At least some part of the core we still retain, even though that their generation, their lifetime was very different from what we have. They lived in a situation of scarcity. Jobs were
Yeah. Yeah.
scarce,
Yeah. Yeah.
resources were scarce. But for us, I mean, we were in a kind of a transition generation. We got exposed to quite a lot of technologies
Mm,
that opened up
mm.
opportunities, new jobs. I mean, digital marketing. I don't think my father would have even need to deal with that. That's an opportunity that we have today. So I'm working on that as a job. So I mean, so those sort of things also we had. I mean, we have taken from our previous generation, our environment and ecosystem, and I think we still retain certain elements of that. And then we also had formed our own personalities. I mean,
Our personality.
if we ask your father or my father, he would, or they would come and say these are the 5 or 6 things that you may not and have not developed, or something like that, which they would have
Yes.
wanted to have.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we are mentally mature, I think probably we may lead up our family and kids in a little better situation. I think that's
Very
what
true.
I think
Very true. KK, I'm
will
enjoying
turn out.
these sessions. I'm enjoying these sessions. I did prepare for this, but a lot of things come up as we speak. So in that, it's really good. Before we close out, any closing thoughts, KK, on family culture?
I think this question, the decision to take this episode, right, like this topic itself, very invigorated with me, like something, right, like okay, I mean, even though we do this in an organizational setting, how important it is, right?
Mm,
Because I mean, I would not lie if I say that I didn't prepare for it, but I went through some resources, and I also started looking inwards into how I had, or like for that matter, like what I have inherited, and what are the factors that influence certain elements, good or bad, in me. So it definitely offered me an opportunity to travel inwards, back into the growth journey. I'm sure you must have also gone through that.
yeah, yeah,
I think I'm really enjoying this conversation, and this. We hope our listeners also take something. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you, KK, for joining in this particular journey.
Thank you, Joseph, for doing this.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation on building family culture and elements of family culture and how we can grow those elements. If you find any aspects very attractive, please share with us, please share with others. And if you have any questions on being a dad, or what you would want us to discuss any other topics, please post it wherever we are posting, in YouTube, in LinkedIn, or maybe on your WhatsApp. So please reach out to us. Any topics, any comments that you have on these sessions.